Captivating and action-packed, the Blood and Ash series by #1 New York Times bestselling author Jennifer L. Armentrout is a sexy, addictive series perfect for fans of Agotar and Fourth Wing. Chosen at birth to usher in a new era, Poppy's life is not hers. A maiden in solitary, waiting for the day of her ascension, Poppy would rather be with the gods fighting the evil that took her family. The entire kingdom rests on her shoulders when Hulk, a god bound to protect, enters her life. He tempts her with the forbidden, a kingdom. Blood and Ash, a thrilling, steamy escape, available in print, ebook, and audiobook.
Ramiro's running Ghorman. She's been on it all year, all this time, hiding it. I doubt there's 3 people in the building that know what I've just told you. Why Ghorman? I don't know, I can't believe they've kept it so quiet. Everybody thinks that she's been put out to pasture since Ferrix.
What's the obsession with Ghorman? What are they after?
I don't know, I'm trying to rethink this all with her in the picture. It doesn't make sense.
All the propaganda.
Maybe she's oversight.
Or what? Smear campaign is an opening move, not an end game. I need the end game.
I don't have it.
Well, hello there, Star Wars fans, and welcome to episode 2 of Road to Rebellion, the official Around the Galaxy Andor after show. I'm Pete Fletzer.
And I am Nick Mielke, and thank you, as always, for hanging out with us here on Around the Galaxy, part of the SSW network.
Well, today we are talking about episodes 4, 5, and 6 of Andor. We are already halfway through the season, and we are spending a lot of time on the planet Ghorman.
So put on your finery, but before we dive in, there is a quick warning. This is indeed a full spoiler show. We're going to talk about everything that dropped in episodes 4, 5, and 6 this week. And perhaps we may even speculate on what we think that means based on what we know about Star Wars lore. So if you're not already caught up, pause, come back as soon as you're ready. We're still going to be here when you get back, but we don't want to ruin anything for you.
Absolutely not, because it's so good. And each week here on Road to Rebellion, we're unpacking the story. We're unpacking the characters, the big moments, the little details, and everything in between.
We will share our impressions. We will deep dive into the themes, and we're even going to pick an MVP of the week.
Ooh, all right. Well, let's not wait any longer. It is time to kick this off. Let's jump in with our first impressions of this week's 3 episodes of Andor. Nick, I'm going to start off, and I'm going to say I feel like this week was really a more linear story between the 3 of them. You said last week, the pieces were on the board, and now the game is really, really kicking off. It really feels more like a movie to me, even more so than the first week. And I feel like that when all this is said and done, I think I'm going to be looking at Rogue One as almost like season 3 of Andor.
It's really true. And it is one of those things that we're so in the mix of everything that's going on. We are headed in a very definitive direction, and the pieces are on the board. Now it's time to put those pieces to work. And that's exactly what we got in these 3 episodes.
Yeah, it really feels like it's speeding up. It's headed towards something. I think that's one of the things, like with Andor season 1, I felt like it was a cool story. You were obviously building this early rebellion, but now after watching this week, it really feels to me a lot more like, wow, the rebellion is starting to happen. And now you start to understand the reason to collect other systems and bring them on board and what's all happening. So it's really well put together. But let's walk through what happened on this week's episode, and we'll share our thoughts along the way.
Absolutely. I love that this episode kicks off episode 4 with the 1 year later title card, but then, and we saw this in the first episode, it's giving us that timestamp. This is now 3 BBY. We've jumped a year ahead. We know we've got 2 and 1 ahead of us. It is going to be what's coming up next. But right now we are in 3, and there's a lot happening here. Cassian and Bix, we see them. They are in hiding on Coruscant in clearly a safe house apartment, very sparsely, appointed. And they appear to clearly be romantically involved at this point. Yeah. We see it opening up. Bix is having a nightmare. She's sleepwalking, and she's going back to Dr. Gorst. And we talked a little bit about that during the first couple of episodes. That has had such a grip on her and continues to be, a part of the trauma that she went through, which is obvious. And he's torturing somebody else, and then Cassian jolts her awake.
Yep. And then from there, we switch to Ghorman, where Syril is walking through the streets. He's on his way to work, whatever that work may be. But we're starting to see already some small protests on the street. His mother, of course, is mocking him for taking this job in the Bureau of Standards. She says the Ghormans have always been too good for the rest of us. And he snaps back in a very real world situation. He says, well, you've been watching too much Imperial news. I think he could have inserted the word Fox for Imperial there. And unseen to him, though, the Ghorman front has bugged his office. A gentleman named Caro Rylands and the Rylands family are watching Syril as a potential ally. And as Syril is leaving, he's handed this spider-shaped candy containing the address for a secret evening meeting by someone who's part of the Ghorman front. He returns to the office safe room. He calls Dedra, and says they've made contact, and asks if Dedra should share this with Partagaz, and she's not ready yet to share it. And Cyril's a little bit frustrated. I think one of the things there, Nick, we'll kind of step backwards into this. I'm still trying to figure out, and even though we'll see Dedra and Syril together a little bit later in the in this week's episodes, I'm not sure what their relationship is now. Last week we saw them living together. This week it feels a little bit more like they're working together. What do you, especially because his mother even says something to him like, there was a woman who was finally willing to listen to you, and so that felt kind of strange to me. I'm not sure where their relationship stands. Obviously, it's a relationship of convenience. It probably always has been, but I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on what we saw there?
I do, and I feel like maybe I even speculated about that a little bit on our first episode. I wasn't sure where that relationship was going. It seemed a little too convenient that, all of a sudden these two are together, these two, very different but polarizing characters. And I think what we're seeing is she has a purpose. And she said that in that meeting that they had, they meet the mom in episode 3, kind of the get together. And she kind of, I have my own plans for him, and I'm going to do this and that. This is a lot more business transactional, almost like when he's in that safe room, he's so excited to be doing this like spy stuff, and the look on his face when she's like, he says, shouldn't we tell Partagaz? And she's like, no, I'm not ready. And there's just that part, but we're doing the thing. Like, he's very eager, almost childlike. Like he's into this cool thing. He's having fun. He's doing the espionage. And she's just like, just calm yourself. We're not there yet.
Right.
And it was very fascinating. And I think also just lays bare more of what Dedra's intentions are at this point.
Right. And then the other romantic relationship is Bix and Cassian. And it is clear that, maybe they are or not married. I don't know that there's probably no room for that in the rebellion at this point. But I think this is the first time that we see that they are, back together as a couple. Because I think what we got from season 1 was they were a couple at one point, and he's very concerned about her, and it seems like the PTSD from Gorst is not going away.
No, it's definitely not going away, and it is something that we're going to have to watch, because we already see how he's reacted to things that relate to Bix, and for him to say, I'm in this rebellion, he, wants to be a part of all this, but at what point, is she a liability for him?
Captivating and action-packed, the Blood and Ash series by #1 New York Times bestselling author Jennifer L. Armentrout is a sexy, addictive series perfect for fans of Agotar and Fourth Wing. Chosen at birth to usher in a new era, Poppy's life is not hers. A maiden in solitary, waiting for the day of her ascension, Poppy would rather be with the guards fighting the evil that took her family. The entire kingdom rests on her shoulders when Hulk, a guard bound to protect, enters her life. He tempts her with the forbidden, a kingdom. Blood and Ash, a thrilling, steamy escape, available in print, ebook, and audiobook.
So next we are at an ISB meeting. I love this ISB meeting room, by the way. I feel like these meetings are taking place inside Spaceship Earth at Epcot Center. That texture on that wall, the stark white imperialness of it all. Those look like some fun meetings. But Lonnie, who we know is Luthen's mole, he's the recipient of that awesome monologue in season 1. He he's a part of this discussion. Partagaz is kind of dressing people down. What's going on? What are the problems? And after, a little bit of answers, some egos pop up. Lonnie chimes in and he says they're detaining too many prisoners to process. And Partagaz really likes where he's coming from this. So he kind of rewards him. He welcomes the candor and says, you should be speaking up. We need to hear from you. We jump from there to kind of this great cutscene of Mon Mothma lobbying senators. I really love this. We see her with different groups of people, and they're trying to repeal the PORD, which is the Public Order Resentencing Directive, which is the law that we saw enacted in season 1, which is what caused Cassian to be arrested at the beach by, I think, the stormtroopers and the fake K2.
Yep.
So she's trying to lobby. She's trying to get them a part of this, but she doesn't get any votes. There's a lot of fear of opposing the Emperor. And even among the senator from Ghorman, who, their planet is about to be right in the spotlight of everything. So she's unsuccessful. We go back. We have Lonnie talking to Luthen. He goes down that long, creepy elevator. And he tells, Luthen, Dedra's going to be running the operations on Ghorman. And he wants to know what is the end game there. So we get a lot of the pieces of this starting to be, like we said, the pieces on the table. Now they're being pushed into their positions.
Right. Yeah. Luthen he's like, this doesn't seem like the right play. There's got to be something there. And that it certainly piques his interest for sure. Back on Ghorman, the citizens are starting to decry the Imperial overreach because businesses are being crushed. There's rumors of a fortress / armory. And this was at the town hall meeting that Syril was invited to. It sort of feels like an underground town hall meeting. It certainly feels like it's out of the prying eyes of the Emperor. And then there's an outspoken citizen named Lazine who warns the town that they'll turn Palmo into a prison, which is that main city, before they leave. And there's also a woman who points out, an elderly woman, who says that this new annex is going to cast a shadow over the Tarkin Massacre Memorial. And this was the first we've heard of this, and this is starting to address some of the crossed lines as to what really is the Ghorman Massacre. One of the things we talked about last week is how Tony Gilroy said they will clear up what it all means. So apparently 16 years before, Moff Tarkin landed his shuttle in the middle of town and killed 500 innocent people. And now they're talking about this annex, which is being built, which is going to cast a shadow over what's been built in memoriam. After the meeting, Syril meets with Caro and Enza and a few other members of the Ghorman Front, and they agree that all the secrecy that's coming up around the annex is implying that it's a dangerous military buildup. In the meantime, Luthen, who has now been, as we just said, had his curiosity piqued, wants Cassian to go undercover to Ghorman, and he will not allow him to bring Bix with him. Nick, it's really interesting to see this connection. Just to hear Tarkin's name, I think is really interesting, and they're starting to sort out what this isn't that wasn't the Ghorman Massacre that we're probably going to see next week, but just the fact that there was military presence there before. One thing that I wanted to get your read on is there's like a really unique accent from the Ghormans. It's and the language that they speak, Gore, feels a little bit French Revolution and a little bit German, but it's certainly trying to, I think, evoke images of the French Revolution.
It absolutely is. And I also think that Lazine is the citizen who speaks up and warns about turning it into a prison. If I'm not mistaken, Lazine is the one who looks like could have been also cast to be Super Mario. Has the mustache and kind of that burly, plumber build, especially when we see them again later in one of the other episodes. But it is, and it has this, like you said, it's, what kind of meeting is this? An underground town hall? We know that Rylance is a government official, a city government official, and we're told that. So it's almost like maybe this is just a regular city council meeting. But this is pointing to us and showing us as the audience, there's already some unrest going on here. which is going to feed into this Imperial plan that they are working to put into place.
And it's working. And the thing that I think we're seeing too is, especially after watching last week, it's working, and it's almost sickening to see that this plan is working as well as they wanted to so far.
And I will also have to say that watching these episodes and seeing some of these things go on, it does feel a little bit like it hits a little close to home in some of the things we are seeing in the real world. Talk about propaganda in the first, few episodes, some of this stuff with the citizenry. It's very timely, and that's also a very Star Wars thing, because we know that George Lucas used a lot of social and, political things that were going on at various times, both in the 70s and the 90s and 2000s. So it does also, hit right at home. And I think that's part of what just gives Star Wars ultimately, but certainly the show, the feel that it does.
Without a doubt. Yep.
Awesome. Well, we keep moving along and we end up on Dakar, which is a planet that we are familiar with from the sequel trilogy. And we find our friend Wilman Pack. He is using his skills that he has learned. We don't really ever fully learn where he's learned these skills. But he unveils a Rhydonium mining machine to who else but Saw Gerrera and his partisans. We have this great sweeping shot. I got really excited when that shot came up, entering into this scene, because we see this little kind of mound. It's not necessarily the temples on Yavin, but we see those familiar kind of mounds that we saw in the sequel trilogy, and we have X-Wings. And these are clearly Rebel X-Wings because they have cool, like, tiger stripe looking paint jobs, and, they're coming in for landing. But we also see two tubes standing up on top of the hill on watch. And so as soon as I saw two tubes, I was like, Saw's coming. So Saw Gerrera is here, and he demands that one of his soldiers, a guy named Putti, will master the Rhydonium operation, learn, this machine that Wilman has built. And he wants Wilman to teach him. And he says he has to leave because he was only supposed to be here for a couple of days. I brought you what I was supposed to. But Saw says, you're here until I get what I need. Saw is leaning into that, rebel extremist kind of mode. It's all about the mission. It's all about getting what he wants. And we close episode 4 with Cassian getting ready to depart because he's been told you can't take Bix with you. And so he goes to the little, basically like the fake ID station, and he gets his identity from, was it Bones? Was that guy's name?
Boz.
Yeah. Okay. So this just kind of freaky looking guy with the crazy eyes and the good makeup. And I love he puts in this earbug, and it's like watching a Mission Impossible movie, because it's giving him, this is your backstory. This is where you live. This is what you did. And it's as he's in transition and as he's moving. And then we also leave, we close this episode on that scene of Bix taking a hit of what is clearly some sort of drug that is how she is dealing with all this PTSD from the torture that she went through in season 1.
As that episode ends, the next one opens up, and it's normally we wouldn't focus on the difference between the episodes, but this one opened up actually with the Andor logo. Every episode does, and the music is slightly different. It sort of matches the tone, but this one didn't use music. It used static and Senate broadcasts and different broadcasts to kind of pull it all together, and then goes into Clea monitoring some broadcasts, and she learns that Davos Skolden has uncovered a forgery in his art. We don't know why she cares so much about that just yet, but she definitely does. And the point you were talking about before, Nick, what we found out was Cassian's with that secret sort of code phrase, which was he says, what is it they exactly say? It's something like,
Can I help you?
Ghorman?
Visiting friends?
Why do you ask?
I'm curious by nature.
I have friends everywhere.
Bon?
You could almost tell that she was asking him for a code, but it didn't quite come across that way. But that was great. Meanwhile, ISB raids Syril's office. He's on the phone with his mother again, and he is stunned. And Nick, I'm not sure if he really is stunned, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then afterwards, on the back street, he meets back up with Rylands again, Caro and Enza, and they're trying to recruit him to spy on these incoming cargo ships because they suspect that there's weapons in there, which is very different than building material for sure. Nick, let's talk for a second. As we watch this, Syril is playing this spy game, and he plays it so well that I can't tell if he's truly surprised or not. I mean, he had to be. Did Dedra tell him the ISB would break in there? Or did that kind of surprise him? And even if, here's the whole thing, and this is why the show's getting really interesting, is even if she didn't tell him, he had to know that something was happening, which is why he's been monitoring, that he's been being monitored. Yeah. And so it's a really interesting sort of coming together.
It does. And honestly, I kind of had this thought at some point while watching these 3 episodes and kind of seeing this, double agent, secret agent, triple agent. It reminded me of the beginning of Kingdom of Crystal Skull when Indy's pal, it's like, turns out I'm a double agent. There's so many machinations going on in this plot. You've got these, the Ghorman rebels doing their thing. Syril thinks that he's, being the mole and getting information for Dedra, but at the same time, he's being played somewhere along the line. And that's why I think, and I made this prediction in our first, episode of Road to Rebellion, that I feel like there's the possibility that he, turns rebel at some point or has this big crisis of like, wait, my friends were using me for their own devices, which is kind of a theme that we're going to see develop about, what ultimately matters. Is it relationships or is it the mission? And so I loved seeing how all of this is getting set up, and he thinks he's doing a thing, but then all of a sudden, was he acting upset that they raided it, or was he really upset?
Right.
And so he doesn't know where he is, even though he thinks he knows where he is.
Exactly.
Well, we transition back to Coruscant. Cassian is of course gone, but Luthen goes to visit Bix because Cassian had told him she's not doing well. And he hints at a mission for her, then withdraws the offer. He spots the blue liquid that she was taking just before he leaves. And so he knows, she's in a bad way. We go to Clea, and she learns and warns Luthen that Skulden is going to reappraise that art collection, putting their hidden microphone at risk. Because if they're going to examine all these and figure out what else is a fake, they're going to be exposed. So that's a big concern. Syril hands off classified files confirming weapons cargo as he leaves to return to Coruscant. He ends up back on Coruscant. And this is where, again, we have this moment where we wonder what's really going on with this relationship, because he gets to meet Dedra. She's pretty cold. She's pretty calculating. And she says, he says, how long am I here? And she says, 1 hour, turn off the lights. And he's like, what do you mean? Only 1 hour. And she's turn off the lights. So is this her placating her, pawn in this whole game? And this is a way to keep him where she wants him? We don't know at this point, but it certainly felt calculated along those lines.
Captivating and action-packed, the Blood and Ash series by #1 New York Times bestselling author Jennifer L. Armentrout is a sexy, addictive series, perfect for fans of Sarah J. Maas and Rebecca Yarros. Chosen at birth to usher in a new era, Poppy's life is not hers. A maiden in solitary, waiting for the day of her ascension, Poppy would rather be with the guards, fighting the evil that took her family. The entire kingdom rests on her shoulders when Hawk, a guard bound to protect, enters her life. He tempts her with the forbidden, a kingdom. Blood and Ash, a thrilling, steamy escape, available in print, ebook, and audiobook.
It's interesting too, because I'm not sure if it's at this point or later when Clea and Luthen start discussing the microphone problem. How, there's sort of that mirror of the Empire saying we're detaining too many people, and you then have Luthen saying, I don't even know what we're getting out of all this information. We have too much information. What are we doing with it? So it's like, as these things build, nobody's prepared for how big it's going to get. But as we continue the story, Cassian arrives on Ghorman. He's all dressed up. He's playing the part of somebody named Varian Sky, who is a designer apprentice, and it's sort of his dream to come to Ghorman. And he's sensing a little bit of local resentment. He talks to the bellhop, and again, this was that great Cassian charm in full effect, where the bellhop was told not to talk about sort of the concerns, some of the unrest, but he gets it out of him, and he just sort of explains to him once again a different perspective on the Tarkin massacre.
And I love I love how in this, we kind of get it hinted at as the Tarkin massacre that, first time. Then we get this with the bellhop, and I was there, and he tells the story, and this is the story that we have heard in some of the books and comics and things, hearing about the Ghorman Massacre, and there's a version in old canon, in other canon, about what happens.
It was Moff Tarkin. People wouldn't clear, and he wanted to land. And more of us kept coming. We thought there was safety in numbers. Who would land the cruise on a crowd full of unarmed citizens? I was with my father. He was killed, saving me.
Sorry to hear that.
Haven't gone very far, have I? My wife thinks it's insane we stay here. Do let me know if there's anything else you might need.
So now we're learning, okay, that gets a different name. That's not the Ghorman Massacre that I think, like you said, we're still heading towards.
Right.
It's its own. And so they bring in this emotional contact and concept with the statue to those people that happened to.
It definitely, it brings it to life. And again, the way this show tells the story through the characters versus telling us, you get the sense as to what it really means. But later that night, Cassian is sitting at a Ghorman bar, and Enza, the woman who is Caro's daughter, I believe, meets him in there. But they weren't supposed to meet until the next day. And talking about it here doesn't do it justice. Hopefully you've all watched it. But the way Cassian points out to her that, her impatience is clumsy and it's reckless, and he warns her against being careless. And even I love when he says something like, tell the two people who are following me that they're just being, they're just creating more problems or something like that. It was so, and again, the way he goes back and forth between being Varian Sky and being Cassian, telling him that, telling her, I loved when he was like, I could be an Imperial, I could be the spy, I could be any of these things. You're lucky that I'm Cassian, the guy that you're supposed to meet, but you need to be careful. But the next morning, he meets with Caro, and he kind of briefs Cassian, saying that what they're trying to do is hijack an Imperial weapons shipment to prove to the people of Ghorman that it is a military buildup. And Cassian wonders why that's really valuable, because if everybody already knows, why do they need to do that? Nick, what did you take out of the Cassian? Seems, I don't know, is he uncomfortable? He seems very almost like he's learning his own style of leadership or something in these scenes, sort of just because he's playing in that zone of how not to make mistakes, which is really interesting to see as a viewer too, to watch. This is what we're learning. So. Yeah,
and I really like, we're seeing the development of Cassian the spy, which is how we meet him in Rogue One, more fully formed. And you see these little bits all along the way. In the very, very first episode, he's being flirty and putting the Imperial tech at ease that is already, nervous and on edge. And it walks this really fine line that I find fascinating between being intentionally charming in order to get his way or to get in the door or get a code or a key or whatever. But also in that moment, that charming nature also reveals his humanity. And in that conversation with the bellhop, like by the time that's over with, like he says, he makes an effort as the guy's going out the door to say, hey, thank you for telling me that. Like that's that part of him that is also, finding that line, and he's going to have to find that line with Bix, and he's going to have to find that line, continually throughout this war. But they set it up so well that you can't help but believe, he's suave and he's a cool spy guy, but he also might actually care.
Yeah, I think you said it 100 times better than I did. That was great.
Well, as we keep moving, we find Syril and Dedra with Partagaz. They're debriefing him on all this information. And once the information and the intel is going to be public, he says retribution has to be appropriate, according to Dedra. I'm sorry, she says that. And I love that little bit of detail because basically they're saying you've got to let these scrappy insurgents get a win, because if they get away with something, you can't just squash them. You have to let them get bolder, because if you let them get away with stuff, they're going to try and they're going to overreach at some point. So they're playing that shell game. They're playing chess. Do this, make them do that. And so that's a great scene between those three. Again, Syril feels like, I'm in. I'm like, I'm one of the guys. I'm a part of the team. And Dedra's reactions throughout this, he exclaims, he says, does it ruin it if I say this is one of the greatest days of my life? And she's instantly exasperated, and she just looks at him and she says, well, it's good to see you happy. And I love that little bit of like, he's a kid in a candy store getting to do cool grown-up spy stuff.
Yep. And which is what makes him so easy to manipulate, I guess, at this point.
And she's kind of got that act like you've been here before, bro mentality. So we go back to Dakar, and Saw asks Will, how far along Pootie is. Is he ready? And they have, he's just like, okay, we're done. We're there. And then what is a predictable, but at the same time, surprising and exciting turn of events, he shoots Pootie in the head. And he says, yeah, he was transmitting to the Empire. They did the whole say the wrong place. We're going to this place. And you could tell Pootie was probing him for details. Where are we going to go? If I knew which place we're going to hit, I could focus on that one variation of this piece of equipment, trying to ferret the information out of Saw. Saw obviously is smarter than him. And so they abandon the site, and Will goes with them. He's forced to travel with them because he's going to be the one running this fuel heist that they're going to take on. Cassian meets Luthen in the Steergard shipyards, which is another location I think is unfamiliar, as a pickup point. And
we've never been there, but we've heard the name.
Okay.
Yep.
And so he warns, Ghorman's patience is going to backfire. Luthen says, we can't abandon it. If it burns, he burns brightly. And he orders Clea to recruit Vel. Like, we got to keep pushing this thing. We've got to, kind of the same way the Empire is playing a game to make this mean something. Luthen's kind of doing the same thing. He's trying to make it mean something for the rebellion. And then Cassian returns to Bix, and he learns that Luthen offered her a mission while he was away, and he does not like that. He doesn't like that Luthen went to Bix. He storms the shop. Luthen accuses him of being reckless, and that's that whole thing. Your emotions are coming into play here. You're out of protocol. You're soft on Ghorman, but you're willing to protect Bix. Like, you have to pick. Is it the mission or is it the person? And that's, you see Cassian calculating that even as he's talking and even as he's being bold in the face of Luthen because he's mad. You can tell he hit a nerve there.
Well, it's interesting too, and I think that whole conversation between Luthen and Cassian kind of brings us back to the end of season 1, where he literally even quotes him. He says, "Kill me or bring me in," and he says, "You're in." Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, Cassian just feels like these Ghormans are not ready. It's going to backfire on us. It's not worth doing. And meanwhile, Luthen is truly looking at that bigger picture. Mm-hmm. Luthen he's playing that I hate to use the overused phrase right now in our current media, but he is playing that chess game. He's like, listen, even if Ghorman gets destroyed, it's fine because it's going to bring more people into the rebellion. And if they don't get destroyed, it's great because they have the money and the backing and they can be powerful. Mm-hmm. And Cassian is looking at it from that really tactical, hey, listen, they're not ready. They're going to get killed. They're going to walk into something that they can't handle.
And I love you use that line when he says in season 1, kill me or bring me in. Luthen throws it back in his face in this episode. Yeah. He says, you said kill me or bring me in. You're in. What do you want? Yep. Like, you want to be in, you got to be in. And so for that line to come back full circle is such a great moment too.
Captivating and action-packed, the Blood and Ash series by #1 New York Times bestselling author Jennifer L. Armentrout is a sexy, addictive series, perfect for fans of Sarah J. Maas and Rebecca Yarros. Chosen at birth to usher in a new era, Poppy's life is not hers. A maiden in solitary, waiting for the day of her ascension, Poppy would rather be with the guards fighting the evil that took her family. The entire kingdom rests on her shoulders when Hawk, a guard bound to protect, enters her life. He tempts her with the forbidden, a kingdom. Blood and Ash, a thrilling, steamy escape, available in print, ebook, and audiobook.
And then we cut back to Epcot Center, aka the ISB building, and Partagaz is there with Lonnie and another one of the junior officers, and he mentions that Dr. Gorst's interrogation methods from season 1 and beyond have been noticed, and they want to expand it into a program. And so again, Lonnie, knowing that will turn out to have some impact a little bit later, but had one of my favorite lines in this show so far.
The Navy has donated a facility here in Coruscant. I want the two of you to represent our interests in this. I'm counting on you to keep watch on these idiots.
An honor, sir.
Really? It's an assignment. Calibrate your enthusiasm.
Yes, sir.
I'll have a brief sentence.
It's an assignment. Calibrate your enthusiasm.
Calibrate your enthusiasm. Yep.
I'm going to. That's one of those Star Wars lines that will become part of my vocabulary.
We might need to make a T-shirt out of that for the shop. We need to calibrate your enthusiasm.
Calibrate your enthusiasm. You know what? I'm going to do that as soon as we're done here. Well, Vel is waiting in the same bar where we saw Cassian, because she has been called into this project since Cassian was not the right guy. And she meets Cinta there. Cinta, her old girlfriend from the first season, the one mentioned by her in the previous couple episodes, and who was flying Tay out of the wedding party. And Vel tells her that she insisted that she would only take this job if Cinta joins, and Cinta admits that she's been in a year-long recovery from an accident, and we don't know what that is. And the only thing we do know for sure is that it's been a year since the end of the last episode. So, it may go to that theory that Nick, you and I agreed with from last week, that she was there to make it look like an accident to kill Tay Coleman. And maybe even if she didn't have an accident, she would definitely have to lay low for taking out somebody of that level. So once again, Bix is continuing her blue medicine ritual, and then they see Luthen's bat signal from across Coruscant, and Bix says, if you're going on a mission, I insist on going with you. That night, Vel and Cinta share an intimate moment before the heist, which is now ready to go the next day. They have primed and trained the Ghorman front on what they're going to do to steal this Imperial load that's coming through, which they suspect and expect to be full of weaponry.
Weapons, yep.
Meanwhile, the Senate ceremony is taking place, which is very interesting. We see senators being sworn in, and Mon Mothma ends up leaving. It appears halfway through it and discussed just this sort of oath of loyalty to the Empire seems a bit too much for her. Interestingly, Mon and Perrin run into Bail Organa, who it was just leaving Skolden's party. Again, much like here in our country, once there's a inauguration, there's many, many parties, and so they had to be doing them all across. But it also turns out that being at Skolden's party, there's a plan to go and look at his art collection, and this is where Clea puts herself to work. She escorts Lonnie to the bugged artwork. And when they get there, Krennic is there. And the only reason it's worth mentioning him being at this portion is there was obvious tensions between Krennic and between Mon Mothma. They have clearly, what does she say to him? It's nice to see you not in a witness stand or something like that. And meanwhile, while they're all looking at all the artwork, Clea and Lonnie are working together to try. Well, Lonnie doesn't know why he's there, but Clea is doing her best to remove this microphone and having a real problem with it. Nick, it was interesting that Bail Organa was not played by our usual Jimmy Smits.
This is correct. Bail Organa recast, potentially, seemingly, by Benjamin Bratt, wonderful actor in his own right. We texted about this earlier after we watched the episodes, and I feel like this clearly is an indication there's going to be some more Bail in the back half of this season. Obviously, we know he's crucial to, the rebellion and Mon Mothma and the things that she's going to do going forward. But if we weren't going to use him, if Tony Gilroy wasn't going to use him this much in this show, they could have gotten away with a hologram, something they could have made on computer. They could have gotten away with, a shadowy, would have been a way to work around it. So to use a known other actor to recast in this particular position, because honestly, Jimmy Smits, very handsome man, hasn't aged that poorly. I think they could have easily made it work for the time frame. But they didn't. And I was very surprised to see in fact, I did a double take. She was like, Senator Organa. I was like, wait, and they did. And so I'm interested to see what that means for Organa's role, throughout the rest of the show.
Well, let me give you my little theory on that. I don't know if it's the right time for it or not, but
go for it.
Damn it, I'm doing it anyway. My theory. So, like you, I watched the Secret Cargo episode of Rebels. And they do say in that that mission is run by Bail Organa trying to help her get away. So I think if we're going to see her get away, they're going to need to show more Bail Organa. So they're going to need an actor to fill that role. And honestly, I think Benjamin Bratt is a great. He's like, there's a handful of actors that kind of all look like each other. You got all the Chris's. You got, all these. And I think Benjamin Bratt makes a great, slightly younger Jimmy Smits. So I think it works really
totally
great.
Works. And it is, we know based on, like you said, that Rebels episode, what we know, we don't know what the Ghorman Massacre ultimately will be portrayed as on screen, but we know because of that, that's the thing that pushes Mon Mothma to speak out directly against the Emperor. And, knowing what we know about the Emperor and the Empire at this point, that's going to draw a direct, bullseye right in the middle of her forehead. So she's going to need that escape. So it seems that's where we're headed, but I'm excited to see how they do it and see Benjamin Bratt do his thing as Bail Organa.
Give us more Bail, sure.
Yes, and I also just wanted to say I did love the scene with Lonnie and Clea trying to get the microphone out of this fake piece of artwork. Or maybe that was a real piece and they messed it up by putting a microphone in it. But either way, Lonnie is constantly trying to get away. He's like, dude, I shouldn't be here. Like, this isn't my deal. I didn't sign up for this. And she's like, step to your left. Step to your left. Cool.
Smiles.
Trying to be collected. Yeah. They're almost here. I don't care. Move over a little bit. Shield me. And of course they pull it off. But the tension of how they built that was really good. So we continue forward. We have Vel and Cinta. They do pull off the weapons cargo and the hijack with the Ghorman front fairly smoothly. Syril is watching from a rooftop and he is feeding updates to Partagaz and Dedra at some remote locale, assumingly back on Coruscant. And then our friend Super Mario Lazine shows back up and he's from the town hall meeting, the one that spoke up, and he approaches the heist. He's told by a member of the front, hey, look, you don't want to be here. Turn around. He refuses. And so they pull a gun on him. Well, of course, as it happens, the gun goes off. Somebody's going to be hit. There's that moment where like, what happened? What happened? Cinta is hit. The rebels escape, but Cinta is a casualty. We're fueling that emotional, Cinta and Vel get back together just in time for her to be taken away. It's going to continue to fuel, the emotion and the rage behind this rebellion. Syril's instructed to call in the Imperial response team, and Partagaz orders them to let the rebels know we're coming. He says, don't be quiet about it, because they're going to give them their chance to get away. This is going to be the way that they can escape, feel like they've got to win. All a part of that plan. Luthen and Clea do leave the gala with the microphone. I do like as they're walking away, Luthen quips, we should have killed Krennic while we were up there. And she's like, that's the spirit, because there's kind of that moment where she's like, are you really in this? Where have you gone? You've gone into your own head is kind of what she was telling him before. So to see that kind of back and forth between Luthen and Clea was fun. And then we finish up on Coruscant. Dr. Gorst returns to his lab. And like you said, this is going to be turned into... Go ahead.
Yeah, no, this scene that you're about to share really feels like a Marvel MCU after credit scene.
Yep.
The way it's just
great.
It's self-contained and it works. And it's
And so it was set up.
Tell them what it was.
No, it was set up earlier with, your torture. We've kind of been watching from afar. We like what you're doing with the torturing. Let's make that a whole feature of who we are and what we do. And it gave me a flash to Han in Empire and Leia in New Hope and the torture droids. Like, is that something that Dr. Gorst developed also? It wasn't the Doc Brown, headset, but it was still something torturous. So on Coruscant, Dr. Gorst returns to his lab. And in that great kind of horror movie, the lights come on and there's a person in the corner way. Bix is there, straps him into his own torture rig, puts the headphones on, does the whole, hits the button. And as she's walking out, gets stopped by a guard. Well, Bix is back. Bix is on her game, shoots the guard. And then we have that great scene that was in the trailer. And Cassian pops out and they're walking right along in sync. And he hits that button and the building blows. And we cut to the credits. And it was such a great way to wrap up this second part of this 4-episode arc or 4-section arc. And this is, kind of like in that trailer, when they used that clip in the trailer, that was where that music sting hits. The rebellion starts here. And that, song takes off. This feels like, buckle up, kids. The next 6 episodes are going to light your hair on fire.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it definitely felt. And you know what I've noticed in both of the 3 episode arcs is, and this is why I'm convinced the reason why Disney decided to release them together, because if you were to go back and just randomly, like, you can pull a Mandalorian episode and you get a full story, generally speaking. But with this, if you watch episode 5 on its own or episode 2 on its own, it's a middle act. And without that, you don't, because what I've really noticed, where I was going with that, is that when you get to that last 25 minutes of episode 3 so far and episode 6, it is like tension. Like you just, the music, the activity, the cuts, everything that's happening is just like, you're feeling it. And if you just got that once every 3 weeks, I don't know that the show would grab people. So I love that they're doing it this way. I really do. Great. Well, let's take a little bit of a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about, a deep dive into what we felt the theme of this particular arc is. We're going to talk about our favorite MVPs and a little bit of lore connectivity, and we'll be back with more Road.
Captivating and action-packed, the Blood and Ash series by #1 New York Times bestselling author Jennifer L. Armentrout is a sexy, addictive series, perfect for fans of Sarah J. Maas and Rebecca Yarros. Chosen at birth to usher in a new era, Poppy's life is not hers. A maiden in solitary, waiting for the day of her ascension, Poppy would rather be with the guards fighting the evil that took her family. The entire kingdom rests on her shoulders when Hawk, a guard bound to protect, enters her life. He tempts her with the forbidden, a kingdom. Blood and Ash, a thrilling, steamy escape, available in print, ebook, and audiobook.
Well, welcome back to Road to Rebellion, the official ATG Andor after show. Thanks for joining us. I'm Pete Fletzer, and I'm joined by Nick Mielke as always. Nick,
howdy.
These were strong episodes. A lot is starting to happen. The theme for last week I threw out as trust. I felt like last week was about, who do you trust and how do you trust? This week I felt like the theme was commitment and testing the limits of how far you're willing to go for the cause, right? And Andor learned, and I think we saw the whole PTSD thing with Bix. He cares a lot about her and he's worried about her. You look at even, where Luthen pushed back on him and said, you're soft on Ghorman, but you'll go to the ends of the world for Bix. That's really kind of putting it into focus for him. And you also look at the commitment of the Ghorman front. That is a young upstart rebellion. They don't realize they're potentially part of a bigger rebellion. And that's one of the interesting things. All these little rebellions happening all over, which we learned about in Rebels, right? I thought that was a great lesson. But here the Ghorman front is forming, and they're impatient because they need to do what they must because they're so committed to that. And even the Empire is facing, what does commitment look like? Are we bringing in too many prisoners? Are we questioning too many people? Would you agree with me? Do you think commitment was the theme for this week, or did you get something different?
100% agree with you that commitment was the theme. And I'm even going to build on what you said a little bit, because we have kind of two kinds of commitment. We have the commitment, which is how far are you willing to go? How committed to this are you? But then we also have the commitment of being in on the play. And I use Syril kind of as an example. Like for Syril, I don't think it's as much about what would you do for Dedra? What would you do for your horrible mother? For Syril, it's the commitment to, I'm a big deal. I'm important. He's committed to doing this thing. I don't know if there's necessarily stakes behind it other than he wants to be a part of something in a different way than Cassian does and then Luthen does. And you see that you have Will, Will's kind of an unwilling, participant to a degree in here. He did sign up to be a rebel. He didn't know he was getting conscripted by crazy Saw Gerrera, who, is huffing his own Rhydonium and frying his own brain right before our very eyes. But there's commitment from Saw, and it's different levels of commitment all the way across the board. Saw is committed in a way that Mon Mothma is not. Mon Mothma is committed in a way that's completely different than what Skulden is up to, and what so you see it out of every single character, and you could almost create a spectrum of overlaps. Where does this one touch that one? Where does Cassian, excuse me, easy for me to say, where Cassian, his is a love for Bix and is a deeply emotional, personal thing, but he also has a commitment to shoot me or take me with you. And so it's going to be, those threads have all been woven together. It's going to be interesting, to borrow the term from the Ghormans. Those threads have been woven together. The next thing is going to be, how do they unspool in the next 6 episodes?
And hearing you say that, you bring it to light in a slightly different way than I was thinking as well, because what it is it's a commitment to whatever it is that's important to you, right? To Syril, I don't think he cares about the Empire. I think he cares about finding his place. I think Luthen doesn't care about anybody. I mean, Luthen is committed. Luthen, look, it's not a crazy prediction to say Luthen's not going to make it out of the next 6 episodes alive. But he's almost committed to dying for this cause. Like,
and I was going to say, I wonder, of all the ones we've mentioned, his is the commitment that I don't question it the most, as in I don't think it's real. I question it in the most as going, where does it stem from? Right. He's the most committed person that we go, but why? But from where?
Yeah. And then I think you can almost look at, maybe over the next 6 episodes, we will start to see, like, is there that much of a difference between a Luthen and a Saw, right? They both have the same objective. And, what's too far for Luthen? We don't know what too far is for. I mean, he's already said that, hey, even if the Ghorman front fails, that's fine, because it's going to help the cause, which is not a lot different than sort of the terrorist theme of Saw Gerrera and the partisans. So, so interesting. Well, Nick, I think you mentioned your MVP, but who is it and why for this week? My
MVP for this week is Syril Karn. And it has to be Syril because these were the episodes where I found him the most fascinating between season 1 and between the first 3 episodes of this season. It's kind of it's the same transition I felt going from Kylo Ren in Force Awakens to Kylo Ren in Last Jedi. That was when that character clicked and I went, oh, they're showing me something. They're telling me something. Syril Karn, the actor, is doing a phenomenal job of walking this line of like the kind of the mama's boy who has to go lay on the bed in the middle of the dinner party because his mom's still talking crap to him while his girlfriend stands up for him, to, wanting to be like the look on his face. There's a couple of moments where he got that little kid kind of smile, like, oh, I'm doing something cool. And one of them was when, after the meeting with Partagaz and Dedra, there was one, maybe when he's at the meeting with the Ghorman front after the town hall, and they all go away, and it's him and Rylance and the few others. And he's kind of getting that acceptance moment. Like, he's chasing acceptance. He's chasing, ultimately psychologists would dial it back to he's chasing acceptance from his mother. And he's finding it in these other places with Partagaz, with Dedra, with the Ghorman Alliance. But at some point, those are all going to fall out from under him, and we're going to get to see what that does to him. But the way it has been acted, and I'm sorry I'm blanking on that actor's name at the moment, but he is doing such a fantastic job of showing us who Syril Karn is, where Syril came from. He got sidelined, he got busted out. They get his record. They learn about, what happened with him on Morlana. But in the middle of it all is a fantastic performance. So for these 3 episodes, Syril Karn is absolutely my MVP, which I don't like because I don't like him as a person in the show, but it's done so well that's how those work.
Yeah. The actor is Kyle Solar.
Kyle Solar. That's right. Yeah. Fantastic job, Kyle Solar. Cheers to you.
Now, it's interesting because my MVP, before I asked you yours and you told me so we wouldn't pick the same one this week, it was good because mine is a sort of the foil to Syril in the level of engagement, and I'm picking Clea for this week because I felt like first of all, I think we started to see more of her in she was completely underused in the first season. I thought she was a very interesting character. I wanted to know more, and they just kind of kept her out on the outside. First 3 episodes of season 2, we started to see what her role is and see how much of a how important she is to, we knew she was important to work with Luthen, but we just didn't see it in action. And this episode, I almost feel like, as we were just talking about before, how far will Luthen go? I feel like Clea will make sure he doesn't go too far. Yep. She's, and I love her delivery of lines, much like Kyle Solar. Now I have to look up who plays her because she's so good. Elizabeth Dulau, who I don't know from anything else. Yep. But she's so good at just delivering sort of the fine lines, right? I think she delivers comedic lines that aren't funny. For those of you who watch Severance is full of things that you laugh at and you're like, this is not the time to laugh, but damn, that was funny. Like when Luthen says, I only want good news, and she's like, well, you're gonna have to wait for that. And she's even things, just the way she puts things, the way she also stays so freaking calm all the time. Now, what's interesting is there is a scene in the trailer, which we haven't seen yet, where she's crying, and I am scared to death of what it takes to push her to that limit.
Right. How far does it go?
Right. So where is this show going to go that's going to push her that? But to me, again, she had already put Vel in play before Luthen had asked her to. She just stays so calm and cool, and she knows what she's doing. And I love her as a character, and I'm very excited to see where she goes from here. Nick, this was an episode full of really cool moments. Did you have a particular favorite moment? Like I said, my favorite moment was the way she responded to Luthen, but what might you have from this episode?
I have one, and I don't know if I can corral it specifically as one favorite moment, and I'd love to see, or I will love to see in the coming weeks, how it's going to play out going forward. It's the fact that this show, even when there's not music playing, and all the props to Nicholas Britell for, the great music work that he's doing on this show, it feels musical in the movements and the way everything's happening. And we have very obvious and overt things like the wedding party and Mon Mothma dancing and the twirling. And that had that very kind of like Indian, Bollywood dance kind of vibes to it. But all throughout this, the scenes with Cassian in Ghorman, going in and out, Syril coming across the town square and the spider guy who's the Ghorman, like all of that feels very musical to me, and the ebbs and flows of how the characters move, how we're jumping from scene to scene. You have a slow part of a musical movement that then picks up and goes into something fast paced and something high pitched. So for me, the favorite moment over these 3 episodes is just the motion of it all, like the physical motion, the physical visual motion of these episodes make it so compelling, on top of fantastic storytelling, on top of great acting. It just is arresting to the eye in the most visually exciting and pleasant way.
Well, and again, I think there's 2 things that we didn't mention up top, which are important to note that are directly tied to what you're saying. I think same director through all 3, Ariel Kleiman, and these were written by Bo Willimon.
Yes.
And I think if you have a great storyteller like him and a great director, you can flow those things together. And because there is so much, and again, interestingly, I think we referenced this sort of up top, where this feels a little bit more like a linear story, like a movie. It was still made interesting by the way they cut, and they gave you different looks at different parts of the story. So
it was delightful.
Yep. No, I love that. I think that's a really cool observation for sure. So let's talk about some lore connections. Yep. There weren't as many. I'm sure there are things that we missed, but again, if you're looking for that sort of thing, please go to Screen Crush, because they're going to find every single Easter egg. But a couple things that stood out to me: Steerguard, which was mentioned earlier in the season or in the series. That's where the part came from.
That's right.
That Cassian had, that Luthen wanted. So that was the sort of that direct connection. There was a scene, we didn't talk much about it, where Saw Gerrera, when Willman is actually withdrawing the fuel on the as part of the heist. It, it was kind of an ending scene. But Saw is going off on this sort of lunatic rant about Rhydonium and how much he loves it because it's
her. He refers to it as her.
Right.
She is my sister, he said.
Yes. He's just going off on it. So a couple things came out of that. First of all, Rhydonium was introduced in the Clone Wars series as this highly volatile starship fuel. It's also appeared in the High Republic. Yep. It was in Clone Wars. It was in Rebels. And I think, Nick, you and I agree that it's also in Rogue One, because we believe that Saw is probably sucking that stuff in.
He's huffing it out of that tank like a good old-fashioned 90s gas huffer.
Yeah, because he talks about, and the way he described it was, you are now you are now the substance, you're the fuel that explodes when there's friction. Yep. And that's the way Saw sees himself. And I think that's, but we really saw, like, no pun intended, we saw the crazy version of Saw, the absolutely unhinged, like he's losing that.
And he even says to him, he says to Willman, he says, "You think I'm crazy, don't you?" And I'm watching it going, yes, I do.
Yeah. And then I think he says, "I am," right?
Yeah.
And this was the Saw that there's your favorite scene in Rebels, and it's one of my favorite, when Saw shouts back at Mon via hologram about, hey, if you want to play by their rules, don't come to me when you lose, essentially. But I thought that was really cool. And while he's having this rant, the last connection is he talks about the Andor jungle, which is where we first meet him and his sister in the Clone Wars episodes, where Obi-Wan and Anakin help him build his group of rebels. So it was and it really made me think about the fact that Anakin and Obi-Wan were part of the Rebel alliance before it existed, by starting Saw Gerrera on his path, which eventually became the Partisans. So,
well, and crazy or not, it works, and we know why Saw gets where he gets, because by the time he's done with his crazy ass speech, young Will takes that gas mask off and gets himself a big lung full of Rhydonium fuel, gas fumes, whatever, and is clearly having a moment and a reaction to all of that as well. So the power of Saw Gerrera is not to be doubted.
Well, and there's, it struck me that sometime in the next 6 episodes, Saw Gerrera is going to lose a leg.
Yep.
Because we're going to see him come in with
crap foot later.
Yep. We're going to see the what we expect to be the Ghorman Massacre that is talked about by Mon Mothma. I think we're going to see her escape, which again, that's why I think, you and I were talking about they recast Bail Organa. Mm-hmm. We still haven't gotten K2SO, so I don't know when that's going to come. Do you have any thoughts or predictions on the next 2 arcs? We have 2 weeks left of Andor at this point.
2 weeks left. 2 weeks in, 2 weeks left. It doesn't feel fair to say that, but we've already gotten like 5.5 hours of movie, so I can't complain too much. I don't know if I have any specific predictions other than the things that we know are coming. The Ghorman Massacre is coming. Yeah, something's going to happen with Bix because there's no Bix in Rogue One. Something's going to happen with Luthen. There's no Luthen in Rogue. It kind of is like Rogue One. Nobody's coming out of that movie except Princess Leia at the end with the plans.
Yep.
Other than Cassian and K2 and Krennic, like nobody's really coming out of this series by the time it ends. Yep. So I don't know if I have a pinpoint specific thing like, ooh, we're going to see this thing happen. But because this sits so neatly between Rogue One and where we are with these first 2 parts of the arc, I know we have things I'm excited to see.
One of the things that I do my best not to do is try to pinpoint it too much, but I find the deeper I get into a series, the more I find, like I did the same thing with Acolyte. I'm like, oh, this is what's going to happen. And it didn't happen. And I was disappointed, even though there was no reason to be disappointed. Yeah, so I agree. I think we're going to see K2 soon. And the question is he in for 10 minutes of an episode as sort of and here's your new droid, or is it going to be a whole arc about getting K2? We don't know. But I think that there's certainly some really exciting things coming up. So I think, Nick, that's going to wrap it up for this week's episode of Road to Rebellion, the Andor After Show. And thank you, everybody who's listening. Thank you so much for joining us as we continue to break down this amazing season of television.
And I echo your thanks as well. And we are just getting started. We are only halfway through. We're going to be back next week covering the next 3 episodes, which are episodes 7, 8, and 9. And we will see what happens as we draw, as we have said many times, ever closer to Rogue One.
Yep. And if you're enjoying the show, make sure you're subscribed to Around the Galaxy, wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget, this is just one of the shows across our SSW network.
Pete, you are so right, my friend. In addition to the Around the Galaxy podcast, you can also join us live every single Thursday night on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/@the-SSW network. For all of the Star Wars news of the week, we have great celebrity and guest interviews. We take your calls live on the air. You can call in, chat about the topic of the week, and you can be a part of our live chat. So check all of that out, and we'd love for you to be a part of that too.
And if you want to support what we do, you can head on over to our Patreon page at patreon.com/the-SSW network. You'll get early access, you'll get exclusive content, and you'll get a chance to be a part of the best Star Wars community out there.
That's right. And if you like today's show or any of the other shows that you have discovered on the Around the Galaxy channel, we would love it if you would go to Apple and leave us a 5-star review. Share it with your Star Wars friends. Tell us what you thought of Andor this week. And if you want to find us on social network, we're there in various places, various locations. But on most all social networks, you can find us at the SSW Network, or call us and leave us a voicemail. We have a line. You can leave us a message, 504-321-1501, and we are always up for talking Star Wars.
Well, that's going to do it for this week. Thanks again for hanging out with us, and until next time, may the Force be with you.
And this is The Road to Rebellion. See you next week.
Road to Rebellion is copyright 2025 Pete in the Seat Studios. For more information on this show and other shows of the SSW Network, please head over to the SSWnetwork.com. Audio clips are copyright 2025 Lucasfilm.